There's a wall being built across the entire continent of Africa right now. And it's not made of stone or concrete or steel. It's made of trees, living trees. A line of green almost 5,000 miles long, cutting across the widest part of the continent from one ocean to the other. I've been reading about this one for days and I keep coming back to the scale of it. 5,000 miles. To give you a sense of that, that's wider than the United States. Imagine a wall of forest stretching from New York all the way to Los Angeles and then keep going. That's what they're trying to plant across Africa. And the reason they're doing it is honestly one of the most important fights happening on the planet right now, and almost nobody is talking about it. So let me walk you through it. What this wall actually is, why they're building it, because the why is incredible. How you even begin to plant something 5,000 miles long. And then the honest part, the part that surprised me the most when I dug in, because the Great Green Wall is not going exactly the way it was first drawn, and the real story is more complicated and in a strange way more hopeful than the simple version. This is the Great Green Wall, and it's a wall against the desert itself. Let me start with the enemy, because this whole project exists to fight something. Across the top of Africa sits the Sahara, the largest hot desert in the world. And just below it, there's a band of land called the Sahel. It runs east to west across the continent, through countries like Senegal, Mali, Niger, Chad, all the way to Sudan and the edge of the Horn of Africa. The Sahel is not desert, or at least it didn't used to be. It's semi-dry grassland and farmland where hundreds of millions of people live, grow food, and graze animals. The problem is, the desert is moving. Decades of drought, overgrazing, cutting down trees for firewood, and a changing climate have been drying the Sahel out and turning it, piece by piece, into desert. This process has a name: desertification. Land that used to grow crops turns to dust and sand. And when your land dies, everything follows. Food disappears. Water disappears. People who farmed for generations suddenly can't. They get hungry, they get poor, and eventually a lot of them have to leave. Conflict follows. Migration follows. So back in 2007, the African Union looked at this slow-motion disaster and came up with an audacious answer. If the desert is marching south, we build a wall to stop it. Not a wall of bricks, a wall of trees. A living barrier planted straight across the continent, right along the southern edge of the Sahara, to hold the line and push the desert back. The original vision was almost poetic in its simplicity. One continuous band of forest, around 8,000 kilometers long, which is roughly 5,000 miles, about 15 kilometers wide, running across more than 11 countries, coast to coast. And the goals attached to it were enormous. Restore 100 million hectares of degraded land, pull 250 million tons of carbon out of the atmosphere, and create 10 million jobs in some of the poorest regions on Earth, all by the year 2030, okay? So how do you actually build a wall of trees 5,000 miles long? And this is where the story gets really interesting, because the answer changed. The first instinct, the simple one, was exactly what it sounds like. Plant trees, line them up, millions and millions of seedlings dug into the ground in a long line and let them grow into a forest barrier. And in the early years, that's a lot of what people tried, and a lot of it failed. Here's the brutal lesson the project learned the hard way. You can't just parachute into a dry landscape, jam a bunch of tree seedlings into the dirt, fly home, and expect a forest. In the Sahel, a huge number of those early planted trees just died. There wasn't enough water. Nobody local was invested in keeping them alive. You'd plant 1 million trees and come back a few years later and most of them were gone. It turns out planting a tree is easy. Keeping it alive in a place that's turning to desert is the hard part. So the whole idea evolved, and this is the part I find genuinely beautiful. The Great Green Wall stopped being about one literal line of planted trees and became something smarter. It became A mosaic, a patchwork of restored land spread across the region using whatever method actually works in each specific place. In some places, that means planting trees, yes, but the right native trees, the ones that belong there and can survive the dry season. In other places, the best technique turned out to be something almost unbelievably simple: letting nature do the work. There's a method where, instead of planting new trees, farmers protect and nurture the stumps and roots that are already in the ground, the remnants of trees that were cut down years ago. You protect those roots, you prune them, you let them regrow, and the land reforests itself for almost nothing, using trees that are already adapted to survive there. Farmers across Niger used this approach and brought back millions of trees across millions of acres, and it cost a tiny fraction of what mass planting did. In other places, the work is about water. Digging simple crescent-shaped pits and trenches that catch the rare rainfall and hold it in the soil long enough for plants to drink, instead of letting it run off and evaporate. Reviving old local techniques for trapping water in the land. So the real Great Green Wall isn't one clean green stripe you could trace on a map. It's thousands of projects run by thousands of communities across the whole Sahel, all aimed at the same thing: bringing dead land back to life. And the trees are part of it, but so are the farms, the grasses, the water, and most importantly, the people who live there and have a reason to keep it alive. Let me tell you what it looks like when it works, because it does work in places, and the before and after is stunning. You take a patch of land that was basically bare dirt and sand, cracked, dusty, nothing growing, the kind of place where a family can't grow enough to eat. And over a few years of this work, protecting roots, catching water, planting the right things, it comes back. Grass returns, trees come up, the shade cools the ground. The roots hold the soil so it stops blowing away. Crops grow between the trees, animals have something to eat, birds come back, water that used to vanish stays in the ground a little longer, and a family that was one bad season away from leaving can stay, can eat, can sell a little extra at the market. That's the real product of this wall. Not just trees, stability, people being able to keep their homes. Let me tell you about one man, because his story is basically the whole lesson of the Great Green Wall in miniature. In Burkina Faso, there was a farmer who, decades ago, faced exactly this problem. His land was turning to desert, crops were failing, people were leaving the region entirely, and he started experimenting with an old, almost forgotten technique. He dug small pits across his dry fields, filled them with a bit of organic material to attract termites, whose tunnels break up the hard soil and help water soak in, and use them to catch the rare rain and plant seeds right where the water would collect. Slowly, field by field, pit by pit, he brought dead land back to life. He turned barren ground back into forest and farm. People came from all over to learn from him. He's sometimes called the man who stopped the desert. And he did it not with bulldozers or billion-dollar budgets, but with a shovel, patience, and a technique his own ancestors might have recognized. That story matters because it points at the single biggest discovery of this whole project. There was also an agricultural researcher working in Niger who helped spread a method now known as farmer-managed natural regeneration. It's exactly what it sounds like. Instead of buying and planting new seedlings, you teach farmers to find the living tree stumps and roots already hidden in their fields, protect them, prune them, and let them grow back into trees. The land remembers how to be a forest. You just have to let it. This one idea, spread farmer to farmer, has regreened millions of acres across Niger, and it cost almost nothing compared to industrial tree planting. The trees that come back this way are local, adapted, and protected by the people who depend on them, which is exactly why they survive when planted seedlings die. So the Great Green Wall slowly became less of a government megaproject and more of a movement, and the international community eventually caught up to that. A few years ago, at a major environmental summit, a new push called the Great Green Wall Accelerator was launched, with billions of dollars pledged to speed the work up and, importantly, to channel money toward the local community-led methods that actually work rather than just dumping seedlings from the top down. Whether all that pledged money actually arrives is a separate question, and a fair one, because big climate pledges have a long history of being announced loudly and delivered quietly. But the direction of the thinking had shifted from a wall imposed on the land to a recovery grown out of it. Now, the honest part, and this is where I have to be straight with you, because the simple version of this story, the heroic 5,000-mile wall of trees finished by 2030, is not what's actually happening. Here's the reality. The Great Green Wall is years behind its goals. Estimates of how much of the target has actually been completed vary a lot, and it's a hard thing to measure, but by most accounts, as of the early 2020s, only somewhere around 15 to 20% of the original goal had been reached. Not the whole wall, a fraction of it. The 2030 deadline to restore 100 million hectares looks very, very difficult to hit at the current pace. Funding has been a constant struggle. Money gets promised at big international conferences and then comes in slowly or not at all. Some of the countries the wall runs through are dealing with conflict and instability, which makes long-term tree-growing projects almost impossible. And measuring progress across 11 plus countries and a region that huge is genuinely hard, so even the numbers are fuzzy. So no, there is not a finished, continuous 5,000-mile wall of forest standing across Africa today. There probably won't be by 2030 either, at least not in the original form. If anyone shows you a video that makes it look like a solid green line you could see from space, finished and glorious, that's the dream, not the reality. But here's why I still think this might be one of the most important projects on Earth, and why I came away from this more hopeful, not less. The failures taught the project the most valuable lesson of all. That you don't beat the desert by fighting it from the outside with a wall, you beat it by bringing the land and the people back to life from the inside. The places where the Great Green Wall is genuinely working are the places where local communities are in charge, using cheap, smart, local methods because they have a reason to keep the land alive. It's their food, their home. And that approach, even if it never forms one perfect line on a map, is quietly restoring real land and feeding real people right now. So I'd give it this honest status, a real, ongoing, hugely ambitious effort, behind schedule, underfunded against its own enormous goals, unlikely to be a finished literal wall by 2030, but genuinely working in pieces all across the Sahel and arguably teaching the whole world how to fight desertification, which is a fight a lot more of the planet is going to be having in the coming decades. And I want to zoom out because the stakes here are bigger than one region of Africa, and this is the part that I think most people miss. Desertification, land drying up and dying, is not just a Sahel problem. It's happening across huge parts of the world. Parts of the American West, parts of China, parts of the Middle East, Southern Europe, Australia. The United Nations estimates that an enormous amount of the world's land is degraded to some degree, and that every year we lose a staggering area of productive land to drought and bad management. So the Great Green Wall isn't just trying to save the Sahel. It's the largest living laboratory on Earth for a question the whole planet is going to be asking this century. When your land starts to die, can you bring it back? And if you can, how, and how cheaply, and in a way that the people who live there will actually maintain? There's a human side to this that I can't leave out, because it's the real reason governments care. When land dies, people move. A farmer who can't grow food doesn't just quietly accept it. He travels to find work, often to a city, often across a border. A lot of the migration pressure and a lot of the conflict in this part of the world traces back underneath everything else to land that stopped producing. So restoring the Sahel isn't only about trees and carbon. It's about whether millions of people get to stay in the places their families have lived for generations instead of being pushed out by an advancing desert. That's why something that looks, on the surface, like a tree planting project is treated by serious people as a matter of stability and security for an entire region. And in the places where it's worked, you can measure the difference in human terms, not just acres. In parts of Senegal, communities have planted gardens and orchards in the recovered land, and women's cooperatives now grow and sell produce on ground that used to be bare. In parts of Niger and Ethiopia, regreened land has brought back not just trees, but the ability to keep livestock, to harvest, to stay. The wall, where it lives, isn't a line of trees standing guard. It's a region quietly becoming able to support its own people again. That's a less cinematic image than a green wall visible from space. It's also far more real. Here's where I've landed. The Great Green Wall, the simple version, the clean green stripe, was maybe always a bit of a myth. But the real Great Green Wall, the messy patchwork of communities slowly bringing dead land back to life across an entire continent. That's more impressive than the myth. It's slower, it's harder, it's less photogenic, and it's real. And if humanity ever figures out how to push back the deserts that are growing all over the world, the lessons might very well come from a band of recovering land stretching across the middle of Africa. And there's one more shift in thinking I want to leave you with, because it changed how I see this entire project. When the Great Green Wall started, the mental image was military. A wall, a barrier, a line of defense holding back an invading enemy, the desert. And that framing, it turns out, was part of the problem. You don't hold back a desert with a thin line, any more than you'd stop a flood with a single fence. The desert isn't an army marching in formation. It's the slow death of soil, happening everywhere at once, from the inside. And you can't fix that from a line on the edge. You fix it from within, everywhere, patch by patch. So the project quietly stopped thinking like a wall and started thinking like healing. Less like building a barrier, more like nursing a sick body back to health, cell by cell. And once you see it that way, the slow, messy, unglamorous, community by community progress stops looking like failure and starts looking like the only thing that was ever going to work. A wall is something you build once and stand back from. A living landscape is something you tend forever with the people who live in it. The Great Green Wall's biggest achievement might be that it learned that lesson in public, the hard way, and is teaching it to a world that's going to need it badly. Because make no mistake, this is coming for more of us. The forces drying out the Sahel, hotter temperatures, longer droughts, soil pushed too hard, are not staying politely in Africa. The lessons being paid for in sweat and failed seedlings and slow recovery across the middle of a continent right now may end up being some of the most valuable knowledge humanity has for a future where a lot more of the map starts turning brown. If that happens, the people of the Sahel won't just have saved their own land, they'll have written the manual for everyone else. So that's the Great Green Wall. Not really a wall, not really finished, maybe never one clean line, but a living, growing, stubborn fight against the desert run by the people who have the most to lose. And honestly, I'm rooting for it. I want to know what you think. Is a 5,000-mile wall of trees the right way to fight a growing desert? Or is the real answer the quiet, unglamorous, community by community version that's actually working? Tell me in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.